we have a huge burden which is hitting families in a way they like least, but which very few of them even know about. How many people, worried when their electricity bill goes up, know that it's the European, even know the words, European Union Emissions Trading System? My guess is that the name recognition on that one's pretty low. How many people facing the loss of their jobs in a steel factory, facing the uncertain future at their chemicals factory? Major industries aren't dying old industries. We're talking about sophisticated, successful British success stories. And these things have been a huge success. They can continue to be. They're facing the loss of their jobs. Do they know it has anything to do with when anyone from Ed Miliband to Chris Hume to Tim Yeo stands up and says, we're going to do something about climate change? That is the critical challenge for changing policy in this area, for getting better policy in this area. It's why policy in this area has gone so wrong in the first place, because people don't know what's going on. That's the real challenge we have to be confronting here. Because these policies aren't expensive by accident. We aren't going to happen upon some policy innovation which is going to make them cheap. The reason they're expensive is quite simple. It's because fossil fuels have been, and have always been, essential to the prosperity in a modern industrial economy. To understand why, we need to go back to a French economist in the 19th century. They do exist. And a French economist in the 19th century, Émile Levasseur, who said at that stage that France has the equivalent in the 1880s of 2.5 slaves for every Frenchman. That's because of the energy in steam power, that horsepower doing what men and horses don't need to, taking pressure off agricultural land, is why we go from an endless battle for survival to the ongoing economic growth which has made us so prosperous today. So it's no accident. That number, you update that number today, and all the other ways we use fossil fuels, lighting our homes, heating our homes, you're looking at about 97 people working day in, day out, every hour, every day, every year, for our benefit. Now, if you start paying them more, because you use more expensive sources of energy, or if you start sending some of them home, you're going to be worse off. It's not difficult, and it's not easily avoidable. That is the challenge we have with energy policy. That's why there isn't some green jobs pot of gold under the rainbow. Green jobs are an utter myth, even in Germany, which is the one place this idea has some credibility. It's not like the solar industry is in a complete state of collapse. They are, the best studies there suggest they're losing more jobs than they're gaining. Doesn't even work in Germany. Still less here. So you've got this situation where you've got this notion that if we buy lots of copies of Microsoft Office, it'll make us Bill Gates. It won't. It'll make us poor. It isn't the people, the mugs buying this stuff who'll have the green jobs. It's the workers in the countries who aren't embracing these policies, who aren't having their steel factories closed, their aluminium factories closed, who'll get the jobs selling this stuff to us. You make a solar panel in Malaysia, you ship it over here. So green jobs aren't coming. And in the end, so all these costs, all this pressure on families, the 50% increase in household bills in real terms, which Citigroup expect over this coming decade, isn't actually working. The problem you have is, firstly, the policies themselves are wrong. I was telling people years ago, before they all this carbon floor price the Conservatives have now embraced, was back when it was just a glimmer in the eye of an EDF lobbyist. I was telling them, look, this shows what a failure this policy is. The whole point of the emissions trading scheme is people trade, it gives you a carbon price that encourages people to cut emissions. If you're fixing the price, all those traders are a complete waste of time. They've become entirely useless. They just sit there as this multi-million-pound job creation scheme for the City of London. Maybe the City of London needs a job creation scheme, but I don't think it's what people want to see their energy bills go. So it's not working in that regard. The renewable subsidies don't work either, because we have sources of power that get worse and worse as you deploy more of them. As you push your offshore wind farms further into the North Sea, as your onshore plants ruin ever less useful areas of the green belt. these sources of energy aren't working. And the government's making it worse by doing, we get used to criticising when people pick winners on the right. Politicians, they like to pick winners, say, this is the technology, we're going to subsidise it, it will make us rich. They don't do that in this sector. In this sector, they pick losers. They say, let's find the least economic source of power we can, which is putting a solar panel on your roof. Give that £400 per megawatt hour. Now, energy will often sell at £50 per megawatt hour. It's a massive subsidy. So your offshore wind turbine gets £100 per megawatt hour. You're relatively economic, though limited in terms of scale. Onshore wind power gets about £50 per megawatt hour in subsidy. So the worse you are, the more money we're going to give you, until everyone has their place. So we make it worse by picking losers. But in the end, it's worse than that, because all of these policies are pointless if other countries aren't doing them. Sending a factory from Grimsby to Guangdong doesn't cut any emissions. All it makes us be able to look at our emissions and say, well, our total's coming down, we've met our Kyoto targets, and all the while, there are ever more emissions produced in order to supply the British market in other countries because it isn't economical to keep economic activity here. So this is all a waste. This is all a massive, massive waste of money, and it's not working. Now, the public don't want it. It's not difficult to sell the public on that this is a bad idea. The problem is that to the extent they know what's going on. So people don't want higher electricity prices. People really feel higher energy prices. But when they see their energy bill going up, do they think this is the EU emissions trading scheme, or do they think I'm getting ripped off by British gas? That is why it's so important we let people know about this. People don't want higher fuel use. That's the point where it's more obvious. We know what the government's doing. That's why we've seen a rebellion against massively excessive green taxes. Why, despite the political class constantly getting onto its high horse that it needs to make the polluter pay. It's easy when you call them pollute the polluter. It's much harder when you say make the driving to work pay. It doesn't sell as well that way. But when these things are hidden, then we can't fight them, then we can't expose them to scrutiny, then it's much harder for us to challenge them. Which is why we need to call it out, because in the end, it gets to decide what happens. This process we have is that they have a negotiation out in Brussels, they hand down this target, then everyone has a debate, the likes of the CBI, the useless corporatist types, have this debate about how do we meet the target. The problem is, if you have a target which can only be met by economic disaster, and you decide policy on how do we meet that target, you get economically disastrous policies. It's no accident, it's no surprise that will happen. So these targets get decided in Brussels, they come back here, and then no one, in the end, can challenge them. Now, even if, and this is a critical thing, this is the message we need to send out, those of you working in political parties, those of you who engage with political parties, even if you're not too bothered by this, even if you're sitting there thinking there are bigger problems in the world right now than rising electricity prices, think about what this does to other agendas. So, we know that spending needs to be cut in order to deal with the massive deficit. That was the number one issue for incoming Conservative MPs, according to Conservative Home's poll. The bottom issue was cutting emissions. Now the problem is, those two objectives are in tension. They're not just different priorities you can pick and choose with. They are in tension because if your biggest bill, as it is benefits for people on low incomes and the elderly, then pushing up electricity costs, which hit people on low incomes and the elderly far higher than people like me, then you've got a real problem. Then you've got a massive problem for the fiscal adjustment, and you have people that fiscal adjustment feeling a lot more like painful austerity and a lot less like a gentle squeeze, like a 4% cut in real terms, which the spending cuts are. It feels a lot more painful if your energy bill's going up as well. Beyond that, we want to rebalance the economy so it isn't so dependent on financial services. Good luck when all your factories have closed because of high energy prices. That's why we can't sit and accept this being the job for climate change policy specialists. It's why we can't accept this being one part of policy. It affects everything we're trying to do. All of our objectives trying to deliver a state which lives within taxpayers' means, trying to deliver an economy which can sustainably grow and can grow through good times, grow more strongly through good times and bad. All of that is in peril if we don't do anything about it. That's why I wrote Let Me Cold, and that's why I hope that we don't let this go. We don't let this go, and we don't wind up with the solution in a few years' time to high energy prices being windfall tax on the energy companies. It'll be satisfying because they'll deserve it. They'll have had huge windfall profits, but all it will do is further increase the bills facing families. All it will do is further increase that pain. And it's what we're going to get if we don't let people know about this. If we don't let them know now the incredible cost of climate change policy, the fact that it isn't working, and this is a critical thing, which I won't go over now because it's not the fun bit for a speech, but there is a better way. Thank you all for listening.